All right. How's your reading going?
It's going really well. I actually love this story. And the story I'm talking about is Squid Girl by Todd Strasser.
Hmm.
Yeah, one of the strategies I used to take some of the notes, well, one was the messy one, and another one was this T chart. And then I'm looking here, I also did an emotional timeline. And one thing I discovered by doing that is all of the highest points of the main character, the Squid Girl or Sierra, she's happiest when she's with the Travis character. Like that struck me as okay, what's up with that? Aside from it being such a roller coaster ride, all the highest points are with the boy. So I looked at that and then kind of here with my T chart, I also underlined like the biggest ideas here, which has to do with Travis and this idea that she wants to be attractive to him, and then that whole expectation about being attractive to the opposite sex.
So one thing I think that's interesting that you said on your timeline
Mhm.
is that she's happiest every time she's with him.
Yeah.
But I also noticed that right afterwards is when she's kind of miserable. So like when she sees him, she's really, really happy, and then she reacts to kind of what she did with him, and then that makes her miserable, right? So the scene with the turtle, and then the frisbee, and then the cuttlefish. So that roller coaster becomes very timely and quick, right? So she's happy that she's upset, she's happy she's upset. So I think that's something we could definitely talk about.
So I noted highest points, and then you're right, I kind of missed out on the lowest points.
And they're right after, right? So I don't know if you look on page 218, for example,
Yeah, I think
is that scene where she first meets him.
Okay, can you read that part? Which part?
Well, they swim out to the turtles, and then she's kind of like on 217 actually says, "Travis, you gasp! What? Oh, nothing, but it's him." So that seems to be one of the moments you're talking about that she's really excited.
Yeah.
But if you go over the next page after they separate, she literally kind of says, this is after he's left. "You tried water a little longer, watching the wake his flippers and snorkel leave behind. Why did you have to tell him he was wrong about mommy and baby turtles? Haven't you learned anything about boys? They hate being told they're wrong, always." So that seems like a point where she suddenly goes right down.
Yeah.
So I don't know, maybe we can talk a little bit about why does she feel so happy when she sees him and then suddenly so depressed as soon as the interaction is finished?
Well, clearly there's some need from him, I guess, and I guess it's that she wants to be liked, she wants to be accepted, but the ironic thing is she can't be herself. It looks like because clearly, like we remember when we were talking about this, we pointed out that she's smart. She loves science. Her parents informing this love like it's something she actually values, but she underplays it. So oh yeah, that brings me to the point here in my T chart, right? That for some reason, young girls or girls in general, they feel like there's an expectation for them to be a certain way, to be liked or loved. So that really bothered me. That's why I encircled it here a lot. And then I did like a long write about it, which I even read to my kids, just about how feminism is not dead. That whole idea of women and men being equal, or like it's all like even playing. It's not an even playing field. I disagree precisely because these values are ingrained. And then I wrote something here like how there's nothing in the story that suggests the parents put this in her mind. Like it's ingrained in her, like by nature. Like it's just something inside. And then the story ends with Travis accepting her and asking her out, and still it's about him, right? So that still bothers me. I don't know. What are you thinking?
Like the idea that you're saying that these ideas are kind of ingrained in where they come from.
Yeah.
That's been kind of a question of mine.
Yeah.
Obviously, because I have two daughters, I'm kind of very hyper aware of when does this kind of ingraining begin and where does that come from.
Yeah.
But it's also interesting for me to look at it as a man as well, and kind of the opposite side of it. So I just did some writing here. I said the idea I'm getting is that she thinks that if she acts too smart, then boys won't like her, which is kind of what you were saying as well, right? And then that line I already mentioned on page 218. So I think the author really wants us to understand how different genders view knowledge and power.
Yeah.
And so some of the questions I've been thinking about, is she right? Are boys afraid of smart girls? And if so, when does this start for us as well, right? So it's one thing that girls feel that boys are afraid of smart girls, and we don't know when that starts. But one of the things I've been questioning myself about is that true? And if so, why are boys so intimidated by equal or smart girls or women.
Thing is, was Travis, did he look intimidated at all?
No, I think I'm just bringing my own personal kind of
right.
understanding of it, right? I don't think we know enough about Travis to know if he was intimidated until the very end.
Yeah. Because...
Which, I'm sorry to interrupt, but another thing is maybe he's just oblivious. And that could be something else completely. Maybe boys just don't even realize that this kind of knowledge power play is happening.
Yeah.
And what does that say about where this kind of feeling comes from? If girls are so hyper aware of it and boys don't even realize it's happening, what's going on there? What do you think?
Yeah, I'd love to see the story from his point of view, to be honest. Because I think there was also like the whole, with him and his brother, there was that tension of finding out who was right or wrong, right? And you see that a little bit. But yeah, I think it's very subtle. It's something that's why stories like this need to exist, because they have to bring it up to the surface, right? And say like, there's something wrong with that. There's something wrong with you not wanting to be who you are, just because you want a boy to like you. At the same time, I guess that's what you go through at 13. You're not sure yet. You're figuring things out. You know how we were kind of looking at what we can relate to in the story? Let me just point out to something related to the evidence you pointed out on page 222. For me, like, it's the same idea, right? She's dipping down after she's just seen Travis. She's very affected by his effect on her. But the words like Todd Strasser uses were very negative, like to just describe that feeling. So on page 221, she says like, so again, she talks about how cuttlefish are both fish and squid, I guess. And then she not corrects them, but confirms that she knows this. And then she says, a second later, he and his brother are engaged in a mammoth splashing war and have once again forgotten that you exist. Like, forgotten you exist. And then feeling wretched and ignored, you continue down the beach. And then if you scroll down, she says something like, having just made Travis look bad in front of his little brother, you shrug miserably. He must totally hate you now. You're a freak, a major nerd, utterly unfit. Like, wow, right? You're a freak, a major, like, nerd. I don't know. And then the plural of you blew it, in this case, is you blew it big time. So from that, I was just like, this is really huge. Like, that just kind of underscores the fact that, yeah, she doesn't question, she questions herself, she doesn't believe in herself. So I wrote about that, how I could relate to it here. And I would read it to you, but it's kind of long. I don't know. What do you think? You want to hear it?
Maybe like summarize it a little bit.
Okay.
Like,
so
what's the main kind of understanding, or what's the main thing that you related to with that language that she used? Because what I'm hearing you say is that it was the language that really kind of triggered what you relate to, this idea of her feeling wretched and miserable and a freak. So what is it about that language that you find so relatable?
So I guess I put something like how it's not easy to be a girl, and that there's so many challenges about being a girl, and then that I mentioned that triggered those words. And then I put that I was of two minds when I read that. One, I'm angry, like, why can't you just like snap out of it? And another part of me was like, I get it. I totally get it. And then I kind of talk about two instances with a friend who was really insecure, where I had to be small, and then like an ex-boyfriend who I needed to be dumb because he would then feel smart, and how sad I was. Like, I felt like that, wretched and miserable, because I did those things, not because of who I was. And then I kind of like just put how right now with my green hair and my tattoos, like, this is it, this is who I am, and I like hear me roar, and I want my kids to know that that's what I want them to take away after having met another like me, like a woman like that. So I don't know, what were you thinking? I mean, I'm thinking you also wrote something you could relate to also, like, I don't know, or did you do some
yeah, I mean, I guess
that?
for me, I tried to kind of relate to her as a character and through the lens of my daughters again, but that didn't feel really natural because I couldn't relate on that level. So I was, again, kind of looking at it through the male perspective in Travis. And so one thing I think that's interesting is right before she talks about being miserable and whatever, that he does ignore her.
Yeah,
and because he's having a splash war. So it brings up that idea again of him just being kind of oblivious, which goes back to what we were saying earlier, is that it does feel complicated for girls going through adolescence dealing with these emotions, and probably for women even after that. But for men, it doesn't seem that complicated, because perhaps, and this is new thinking, I haven't written any of this down, is maybe we are kind of oblivious, right? And this deeper emotional thinking, or this kind of understanding of how other people might be feeling, is just not there.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times in class when we talk about this stuff, I always see a lot of the girls kind of nodding and understanding what we're talking about,
Yeah.
and the boys kind of looking around like, what are they
I want a
talking
splash
about,
war.
right? Just kind of ready for a splash war. So I don't know. I'm just thinking this now. I haven't written it down or done any deep thinking about it, but I think maybe the author is trying to kind of show us, because I think it is interesting that he's a man writer. First of all, right? We never brought that up. I think the fact that he's chose a first-person narrative of a little girl to write the story.
She's not little, she's
13. But there's that idea of why did he choose to do that, right? Why did he not write this typical story through Travis's point of view? And so maybe he is making that comment of making Travis this kind of dull, you know, unaffected, just kind of blob to raise the awareness of, hey, boys, are we like that? Is that if someone is experiencing such a level of intensity of emotions, are we that oblivious that we don't even notice it or realize the effect we're having? So
And-
that's an interesting thing to kind of think about when you think about that.
And girls, like, hello, snap out of it. Like, you just have to be yourself. But wait,
So
I'm
guys,
thinking, write that down.
I'm going
because
to ask
might
you to
forget.
go ahead and wrap up your conversation in about the next 2 minutes.
Okay. So what do you think's, I don't know, what do you think's kind of we've talked a lot about different things. What's one of the big takeaways or the big ideas that if you were going to kind of write it down, that you would write?
I think that definitely between the two of us, like, we're talking about gender a lot. Like, just the, I don't know, expectations of society that are external, and then some that are just ingrained. And it's, if it's hard for girls, I think it's also hard for boys.
Mm.
That's one. And then maybe like where does it begin? I love that idea. I don't know if you could, if there's even an answer to that, but just the exploration of where does it start? That ingraining. I don't know. Because then, that's a good question.
Yeah,
Okay.
I agree with you. I like that idea. Gender is definitely a topic that comes up for both of us, and the expectations that men have of women and women have of men and boys and girls and all that kind of stuff. And I also really like this idea of it being ingrained in that question of where does it begin?
Yeah.
Can you think of maybe, I don't know, while you were saying that, I was thinking, are there any other texts or movies that maybe kind of connect to that idea of these expectations? Like either that you can think of?
Oh yeah. I'm thinking like the Hunger Games. Maybe when you've got someone like Katniss as the hero / anti-hero, where she's not supposed to be typically pretty, then she's, I don't know, complex and vulnerable at the same time, yet she saves the day. Like,
But again, in that book, I found both of the male characters very shallow and kind of uninteresting, right? Like both, what the Gregor or Pita, whatever, they just become something that we see Katniss through. They're not. I didn't find them characters that were interesting in and
Okay.
of themselves.
so
it
you're
seems
saying for
interesting.
both. You're talking about.
Well, I'm
like
just saying it's
texts
interesting
get
that we
both.
have books that have these kind of complex, stronger female narrators and characters,
Yeah,
but on the other side, we have just these boy characters that aren't really that complex.
they're like caricatures.
So again, I always go back to Eleanor Parks. I love the character of Park.
Oh,
Like he seems like an interesting character that defies some of these expectations.
Yeah.
Aristotle and Dante seem to be another book where you have male characters that are also going through these kind of emotional upheavals
That's true.
that you don't normally see in cross-gender books. I'm wondering now, yeah, so I don't know, just some stuff to think about. But I think those books might help us answer some of these questions of what are the expectations and how do characters deal with them. But it leaves us with the question of where does it begin? I think we just need to think about that further.
Okay, maybe we can write right now because I'm gonna lose everything you just said and I want to capture them.
So where does it begin?
Yes, let's do it.